Trinity Trigger is an action RPG on Switch, PS4, PS5 and Windows that's become kind of obscure nowadays, which is ironic considering the game is 2 years old. Released in Japan on September of 2022, it was localized by Exit Games to North America on April of 2023. It made some noise when it came out, but was quickly overshadowed by pretty much anything else. Developed by a bunch of veterans from the Mana series, like Nobutero Yuki on the world design, Takumi Isobe as director, Atsuko Nishida, known from the Pokemon series, and Hiroki Kikuta on the music. So it has some Mana and small Pokemon influences on it. Mostly Mana though. Anyway, what little fame it gathered was mostly infamy, I'm sad to report. But this time, I couldn't agree more. Everybody and their mom complained about the exact same thing, the game's fatal flaw, the final boss. And while I won't show you any footage of it to avoid spoilers, know that I consider it to be as, by far, one of the worst final bosses in JRPG history. Anyway, the game follows only 3 playable characters. Xian is a cliché character living in a peaceful village with his stepsister. Little does he know that he is actually a warrior of chaos. You see, in this world, the gods of order and chaos have been fighting and warriors of each are destined to kill each other until only one side is victorious. What an interesting plot for a 2023 video game, huh? So Elise here finds out that regardless of who wins, the world will go to hell. So her job is to travel with Xian and Xanthis to make them see what's really going on while trying to prevent a catastrophic outcome. Because of the Divine War though, giant dungeons known as Armas have fallen in several places of the world, affecting not only the quality of life of people, but also their culture. So it's a game with rich lore and well-developed plot. Sadly, it's a translation by Exit Games. While not as bad as NIS America, they still take a lot of liberties and sadly the script often feels kinda safe, if you catch my drift. Despite having tons of alcohol, talking and references ironically, I didn't notice any agendas though, which surprised me. The graphics are cel shading and they don't look as fantastic as they should in my opinion. However, the in-game colors and visuals for dungeons and areas all around can vary from bland to overly beautiful here. I don't think the game had enough budget to reach the graphical levels it probably was aiming to achieve. It almost feels like an indie game, even though it's not. Obviously the Switch version is the inferior one in this area, but it looks and runs fine really. If you notice any frame rate issues, that's on my end. The game should run properly on yours. The character design though is extremely detailed, hand-drawn, and I really like it. It's a style most people won't be able to appreciate though. Finally, the music is very reminiscent of the early Mana series, obviously because it's done by the same composer. It's a good soundtrack, magical, nostalgic sometimes, exciting, but nothing extraordinary. The gameplay is traditional. I know, I use that term a lot because I assume you know what it means. What, you don't? Oh, well, it means you will travel to several different towns with an overworld in between, always resulting in you visiting dungeons, or in this game's case, Armas. In town you will have a small collection of NPCs with barely anything to say, but also some small side quests you can get from them. Most of the side quests though are meaningless. I recommend doing only the ones that are Arma related, we'll get to that later. But you also have 2 different shops. The items shop, which will be pretty self-explanatory, but I need to point out right now that the inventory is limited for healing items and you can only carry a specific amount of each. You can also craft healing items, but you need materials that can only be found in dungeons or the overworld or specifically by defeating monsters. There's also a craft shop. Here you can buy materials exclusively for crafting accessories known as manatite for your weapons. There is no equipment system whatsoever in this game. There is also no skill tree. Your characters can equip several weapons though and switch between them at any time, but you'll always need to find each through the main story or via the Arma side quests that I mentioned, cause to get them you need to reach the end of a dungeon or have your Pokemon companion learn it in these altars. It is these 3 Pokemon-like creatures that transform into every weapon themselves. Each character has their own and they're called triggers, not Pokemon. I'm not sorry for calling them that. So anyway, your triggers or Pokemon or whatever don't gain experience, but instead points. You'll need to upgrade their 6 different types of attack per weapon. However, you can only equip 3 of those 6 attacks, which will become your regular combos when you fight. But before I get to the fighting, there's one more thing to explain about the triggers. Each can equip up to 3 accessories called Manatite, like I said, for the weapon slot and 3 more for the armor slot. Actually, you'll only have 1 weapon slot at first, but as the game progresses, you'll unlock more. These accessories can be found in treasure chests, bought at the craft shops, or crafted with this girl using money and materials. Every accessory is basically one type of buff. I strongly suggest always equipping every weapon with accessories that recover some HP per enemy killed. So how about we get to the battle system now? First of all, there is a cooperative mode. Up to 3 players can control each character simultaneously. I'm not sure if this is better. From what I've read, it makes the game better and it shines in terms of battle system in this mode. But individually, well, here you go. You will control 1 character at a time, but can switch between the other 2 instantaneously with 1 button. As I said before, you can also change between weapons, but to do that, you have to bring up this menu and change manually, which is the same menu you'll need to use healing items or buffs. I'm not sure why they couldn't come up with a shortcut, at least for the items. I get it for the weapons though, since there's a total of 8 per character. Thankfully, the game pauses when you bring this menu up, but really, it's very disrupting to change weapons when you're fighting, and it contributes to the game's fatal flaw, which I'll explain in a bit. So you go around killing enemies with any weapon equipped, but there's a stamina bar, similar to Secret of Mana with the percentage bar. You can fight forever if you want to, but if you deplete it, you'll barely, and I mean barely, do any damage. So you need to fight for a little bit, cause using a few combos, regardless of the weapon, depletes the stamina bar fast, and then wait for a few seconds and attack again. It also reminds me of the combat systems in some of the Tales games. Everybody on the internet seems to hate this stamina bar mechanic. I hate it too, but I got used to it because with the exception of the final boss, this game isn't too difficult. There are no difficulty settings though, but it never gets that hard anyway, at least not until the post-game. As mentioned before, there is no skill tree. However, every weapon has its own unique special skill. You need to feel an invisible bar in order to execute them. They're nothing special in terms of animation, to be honest, but they do slightly more damage than regular attacks. The orange bar you see next to the character icons is some kind of rush aura. It fills up as you attack, and when it does, you can trigger it to temporarily buff the attack power of your equipped weapon. Now, some enemies have a visible range when they're about to use a skill. It shows so you can have enough time to dodge it. Evasion is the only form of protection here since there is no guard button. Bosses have barriers that you need to break first before you can do some actual damage. Once you do, it's time to beat the crap out of them and use the skills and the rush aura thing that I mentioned, because after a short while, their barrier will refill once again. Most of them are also weak to certain types of weapons. If you use the wrong weapon, you'll still do damage to both their barriers and their HP, but not much really. A specific sound effect is there to let you know you're not using the right weapon, like in this battle for example. Unfortunately, there are elemental strengths and weaknesses. Your characters have native elements to themselves, but their weapons might change a bit. For the majority of the game, you won't have to worry about that, but as you approach the end, you start seeing some enemies with resistances to some weapons, which might force you to switch to another character that has a different weapon, or switch to a different weapon yourself. So in other words, the game forces this weapon system on you, and it ends up being tiresome to have to equip 6 accessories to all 8 weapons so none of them falls short. And this is what destroys any enjoyment whatsoever from the final boss. It's incredibly, and I mean incredibly cheap, unfair and frustrating because it has some barriers you need to destroy with only one specific weapon. I won't go into detail, and as I said, I won't show you any footage of it to avoid spoilers. But man, it can easily ruin your entire playthrough. You can grind till your heart's content, but it won't make that much of a difference because number 1, most enemies don't respawn unless you exit and re-enter the dungeon. And number 2, because you have literally no stats apart from your HP. The stats that matter are the Manatite accessories you equip your weapons with. And lastly, we have to talk about the party AI. Your allies will never attack unless you do first. Well, I believe this is done so if you want to run away, they'll immediately obey you. But it also means they aren't very smart. Often they get into danger, lure enemies, get hurt by traps, or get themselves killed. If you have elemental strengths and weaknesses, they won't change to the correct weapon unless you do it manually. That's okay, the East games do the same thing, but those games have much better party AI than this one. I'm not saying it's bad, as it works fine most of the times, but it's infuriating during the final boss. Overall, apart from the fatal flaw I mentioned, I still enjoyed the heck out of this game until that part. The main story is quite short, beatable in less than 20 hours, side quests included, but there is a post-game dungeon with new side quests, new bosses, weapon upgrades, and a new final boss. And of course, it's quite challenging as you may have imagined. I don't think this game shines on any area, as everything seems to have at least one or two issues that should have been addressed by the developers, and no, I don't think the budget was a justifiable reason to overlook them. Not that that's a bad thing, mind you, but I'm sure it's gonna be very disappointing for some of you. So in conclusion, I like the game, I recommend it. The final boss is doable, with enough healing items and mana ties and okay, maybe a few levels. So if I defeated the final boss, trust me, so can you. So definitely give it a chance if you can, just don't expect it to be a masterpiece or anything like that.